talk. Without any further delay, we will kick things off. I'd just like to welcome everybody to the session today. We've got a great session talking about the right KPIs and demographic data for member-based organizations. All those data points you can track, you can measure to help get insight and guidance on what's going on in your org. Next slide, please, Andrew. Before I hand over the mic, just some housekeeping things before we get going. So first of all attendees are automatically muted. So if you have some background noise, dog, baby, whatever, don't worry, it's not going to disturb proceedings. Audio is available by computer, as most of you have, or by phone. There's a dial-in link in your email that you can use if you want. If you have any questions during the session, and I really hope that you do, please ask them using the Q&A function. This allows us to sort of keep track of questions coming in, what's been answered, what's not, and keeps the chat free for more free-flowing stuff. On that note, the chat will be open. Please feel free to add any comments as we go through. And finally, if you do have to drop for whatever reason, we will be sending a recording of this session via email. So keep a lookout for that in your inbox over the next 24, 48 hours. Next slide, please. Before we go, a little bit about the sponsor, I guess, or the host of this webinar today, us at Amelia. We are a online registration platform. We center around making online registration accessible for everyone, all your members. We make admin tasks super easy. We really hang our hat on accurate real-time data, and we try to partner with organizations like yours in a way that makes sense for you. I'm sure you hear lots about our product from other channels. Today is not the day to talk about that. Just one more slide and then I'll pass it over. Oh, I thought I had one about resources. But enough about Amelia Resources. Our host today, Andrew, one of my colleagues at Amelia, works in the product marketing team, has a whole host of experience about storytelling, customer advocacy, bringing products to market. And Wade, who was gracious enough to join us in the Montreal office last week, the CEO of the Indiana Alliance of YMCA, coming to share some valuable insights today. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Andrew. Please take it away.
Absolutely. Good to see everyone here today. I'm going to give you an overview of what I plan to present. Wade, as an expert in the field, is going to be here to help us talk through some of these high-level topics. But in general, I'm going to go over what are the foundational KPIs for membership-based organizations, at least as we view it. We're going to talk a little bit about leveraging demographic data for understanding the community and having more enhanced member insights. The best uses for dashboards and reports, I think when it comes to reporting and analysis, it's just really critical to know when to zoom in, when to zoom out. We're going to talk a little bit about turning data into actionable insights so you can drive outcomes with data, and then using trends for predictive insights. So we'll move on to the first category, which is about membership KPIs. KPIs in general, the way we like to think about them, are that they're a tool to help measure the health of your organization on an ongoing basis. So they can be leveraged for predicting the future, foretelling how things are going to play out and which way things are going to trend. And they also enable you to make decisions based on those trends that you are foretelling, if you will. Some best practices that apply across the board, regardless of what you are tracking, is just choosing KPIs that reflect the potential for growth, understanding engagement from your community, and then the long-term member value. So the length of time at which, in general, your members ought to be expected to stick with you, the different ways they engage with your programming, and so on. I like to think about membership KPIs in these three buckets. The first is memberships and other revenues. So that's specifically the foundational layer of revenues coming through memberships, and then ancillary stuff like merchandise that may be paired with certain programs, and other services and products available within your organization. Enrollment rates as well, which are a nod to how engaged your community is, and then member retention rates. And what I'd like to do in this section is dive into each of those in a little greater depth. So when I say memberships and other revenues, I think what's key here is structuring reporting so you can look at periods in a period over period view. So looking at, if we are December of this year, what did December of last year look like? And that applies to if you're looking month over month, week over week. There's all kinds of lenses, but having the ability to manipulate those time views is really important. A basic one is understanding average invoice sizes and just the number of invoices issued for a given period. These KPIs are important to understand what opportunities for growth exist and what is your bottom line, really. I mentioned in the previous slide ancillary revenue. So if your organization has important revenues outside of membership subscriptions, it's important to know how those, whether it be merchandise or services or other, how they're supporting that bottom line that's created by memberships in general. And then just an easy way to track cancellations, lest you could identify ways to curb that. I think it's important to know not only who's joining, who's engaging, but who's on their way out the door. When it comes to enrollment rates, what I mean here is loosely speaking, just the percentage of allotted participation spots that are filled for a given period. So they can help you understand which offerings are most popular, what times for those offerings are most popular, and give you the insight into what you can expect in terms of enrollment. These decisions that might be influenced by enrollment rates include changes to your capacity. Are there too many spots in a given program where you should be focusing energy elsewhere? Resource and scheduling, just making the best use of your staff time. And for programs that require staff and resource planning, it's a critical KPI and likely worth creating goals to optimize for this type of KPI. Retention and churn. So this is all about predicting and curbing trends in member churn across your organization, which can happen for a lot of reasons. It could be pricing and practicality. When I say practicality, we'll talk a little bit about geography and demographic insights in a bit, but it's also just the relevance of your programs to your community. The goal here isn't to put WISE or nonprofit organizations that are otherwise membership led in the same box. And the fact is the relevance of your programs depends heavily on the demographics that you serve in your community. Obviously, a basic one is tracking that churn over time. So understanding whether it be from a month to month or year to year cadence, how your membership numbers are changing. Are you moving in the right direction, or are you churning more members than you were gaining for each year or arbitrary period? In complement of that, you have the average customer lifetime in days. So that's how much time that members are spending with your org. A good example to think about this is if you are to offer, like in this case, soccer from ages 8 to 10 exclusively. That, at the end of that 3-year period, it may be totally normal for about a third, a cohort that represents a third of those members to be churning each year. And the reason is they've just completed year 10. And so it's about looking at where is the growth in year 8, and on the whole of things, are we year over year growing that number, or is it something we're seeing shrinking? And then inactivity is an important thing to think about when it comes to churn, because it's simply going to be the best indicator. If members aren't engaging with the programs that are meant to serve them at the time that it's meant to serve them, that's likely a candidate for future churn. Lastly, I mentioned before time grains, and what I mean by time grains is selecting the period that you're looking at reporting from. So short-term and long-term data analysis are both valid tools for different use cases. Often weekly trends are going to help with live decision-making for tactical things, maybe most relevant to admin staff, for instance. annual trends are going to help with strategic planning and making more org level decisions for the future. Quarterly and annual timeframes are useful for that type of planning, which means that they're most useful probably to directors and senior leaders, especially in larger organizations. But often all of these views are worth making visualizations for, so that you could have a treetop view on things and have the potential to dive in deep when needed. And so to recap the foundational KPIs as we see them, their membership revenues and other revenue streams, enrollment rates for running lean organizations and being most efficient with your capacity and resources, and then retention and churn. And I think, Wade, at this point, I'd love to ask if your reaction to these overall categories, and if there are other KPIs you've seen WISE use that have pulled out some interesting stories from the data.
Oh, you're muted, but
Wade, you're unmuted.
I like talking to myself. Hey, before we dive in, can we find out who's on the call? Like if each of you could type in the chat box, we can see your name. I just don't know what you do at the Y and why you would be interested in this particular call. So if you could help me while you're typing that in, then Andrew, I'll respond to your question while we're learning who's present. Yeah. So, there's a couple of things that kind of triggered for me. Like there's the traditional ways in which we use KPIs driven primarily around financials. Yeah. I had a YMCA that went to 24/7, which a number of Ys are going to, and thought that they were going to be serving millennials and younger, and wanted to track what that usage would be, only to have that data tell them that their largest users were seniors. So that I thought that was a moment where the data uncovered something that they weren't expecting. Another example I would give you is where someone that was using guest passes and tracking how many people are using guest passes, but then was curious how many of those folks are actually joining as a member, only to find out that that was near to nothing, and that was an opportunity that was missed. It was one thing to know that they had X number of guest passes, but they had an opportunity for conversion. And then there's something that you showed a couple of slides back that struck me interesting, and that is tracking data over a period of time. And so we might want to know about a program from 1 year to the next year. That's the most common comparison. But what happens when we're tracking over a 5-year period, and how does that show us the arc of that program of when it might be time that's at the end of its life cycle, and that maybe we should be considering something, or maybe even show that there's a resurgence in the program that we didn't see before. So those are the 3 things that came to mind. And thank you guys for entering things into the chat box there.
What you said about guest passes as a marketer breaks my heart. Like, you've done the hard bit. They're in the door. They're in your center. Like, you just got to convince them to take that extra step. That sounds like a really good thing to check. I find that as well, the what you said about the cohorts of like a natural attrition in the 10-year-olds in the soccer and like wanting to replace them with 8-year-olds in that example, like taking that zoomed out view that you're talking about and tracking the right things. You might look at, if net churn 1 year is up, you might think the problem is with the 10-year-olds, when actually it's that you're not getting enough 8-year-olds in to, like, you can't stop one, but you can augment it with the other. So the kind of lens that you look through based on your individual programs and your individual business might be a pertinent thing as well.
Hey, Andrew, I could be wrong, but I'm most certain that Kelly was in Montreal with us last week. I just
I think
was, but I knew she was from Anderson.
She absolutely was. And yeah, I'll just agree with Mike. I love those examples. I think the guest pass example ties well to what we're going to talk about next. But I think the point there is, with that insight, you can make more of those initial impressions on those guests that could have a better outcome for for converting them to be members. So perfectly timely way to talk about demographic data for enhanced member insights. And so let's talk about key data points in this space. We mentioned it's all about understanding your members, tailoring experiences to their needs and to their preferences. But demographic data in general just helps you identify trends in their behavior and preferences. And I would almost, we're not referring to members, but I would almost say that guest pass example is exactly what we're talking about here. Some basic demographic data points that we like to advocate for collecting are age, gender, location, and also participation frequency. I mentioned before inactivity, it's a huge predictor of churn, and I think it's really important to know to what extent your members who are active are also actively participating in programs. The member life cycle stage, so that example that Mike gave there, that would refer to where you are in that journey from, let's say 8-year-olds to 10-year-olds in the soccer program we were alluding to. So where are you? Because if you're churning at the end of a program that was intended for you to complete, that's natural attrition that we would expect. If something's happening at the halfway point, that's a totally different story and points to the need to better understand your demographic data and maybe tweak your approach. And the whole goal here is understanding how this data can support KPIs related to retention, engagement, overall program success. These types of KPIs are helpful for drawing out insights that make sure your programs are aligned to your member base. I think that's the key when it comes to demographic data. And there's some global truths that I tend to think about that we threw in here worth talking about, is knowing who the largest age groups you serve are. I think, Wade, you sort of alluded to that with the example you used, getting input from those groups as well. Like once you've got a sense of where your folks are coming from, having that active channel of communication with them and bringing them into the conversation is a surefire way to foster engagement with them. Things that you will learn by playing in that data is realities about income disposal, economic means, and I mentioned before, geography is a part of demographic insights. How far they're traveling, how they're getting to your facilities, those are all things that are going to have an impact on the success of your programs. And so understanding the commute, understanding what I'll call hot pockets in the population where your folks reside is equally really important. And so at a high level, when it comes to demographic data, key points that absolutely need to be tracked are age, gender, location, participation frequency, and that life cycle stage. Ideally, geography and economic data when possible. And then just a best practice again is bringing the community into the conversation to help ensure and verify that your programming is consistently relevant for them. So Wade, I'd love to know if there's any examples you can think of OI using demographic data to drive attendance or make movement on member satisfaction or feedback.
There's two things that come to mind for me, Andrew. One of them would be because I'm here in the state of Indiana, we have emerging populations. Indiana, probably on the surface, if you just look at adults, appears to be 98% Caucasian, but yet if you look at younger kids, and you start to see that the community is changing. So using that data to understand where are the emerging populations at, using KPIs to understand where your emerging populations at is one that's important. And then an issue that we've just dealt with here in the state recently, we asked YMCAs to look at the number of members, track over like a 4 or 5 year period. How many of your members will be turning 65 in the next 5 years? Those that are turning 65 will become eligible for Medicare. If they're eligible for Medicare, it's most likely they're going to move from paying $40, $50, $60 a month in your membership to paying a third-party payer $3 or $4 or $5 per click, you get an opportunity to project that forward, to prepare some game plan for it if you see that data and how you can attack it in the future. So those are two that come to mind where demographics have really mattered.
I love those examples because I think something we talk about a lot is this idea of emerging demographics. The things you can deduce when looking at that sort of information is what's working right now might be right for right now, but it doesn't mean that that's what you plan to be doing tomorrow. And so I think those sorts of learnings can help plan for how to serve those populations as they move through time, or how to serve new and emerging populations as well.
Yeah. The senior piece that we did around third-party payers led us to, as a state, collectively negotiate rates for everybody in the state, one rate, instead of each individual group working individually.
Right, makes sense. Okay, so that's demographic data. The best uses for dashboards and reporting in general. And I think, Wade, you'll have some helpful insight for us here. High level, I tend to think that, both serve totally valid and important, but different purposes. And this section will be about understanding when to use each, how to optimize decision-making with them, and how to interpret them at different, levels of specificity, I guess, if you will. So dashboards, they're going to provide a snapshot in real time, usually unlocking quick decisions. I mentioned earlier, probably relevant to operational staff, folks in the day-to-day. They're going to be great for tracking live metrics like check-ins and program attendance and things related to your staff. And, an example would be same-day program enrollment could tell you how to manage your resources effectively. Reporting, on the flip side, is obviously better for in-depth analysis and strategic planning. It's going to allow you to dive deeper into historical data, pull out some of those insights, Wade, that you were alluding to, that might be on the annual or even over the course of several years in terms of time frames. But it'll help you identify patterns and trends that will inform longer term org strategies. Some use cases could be reviewing retention over the last year, analyzing the success of programs, assessing financial health. These are all good examples, but something that I always make sure to include when referring to reports is the best solutions, in my view, are going to give you blocks to tailor views that are easily understandable to you. So that's as much referring to the way that you think as it is what your work entails, what you need to know and what you don't need to know, I guess, if you will. And when to use one versus the other. How I think about it is dashboards are great for short-term tracking, like I mentioned. They're also great for high-level decisions and presenting to boards or to groups of leaders that are trying to make important decisions with perhaps less information. And reports are great for comprehensive analysis, strategy reviews, deep operational insights. So an example would be you go into a dashboard and you identify that there's been a downward trend in member engagement. A report is probably going to be required for you to get to the bottom of why it's happening for a specific age group or within a specific program or that sort of thing. So the idea is dashboards are great for live metrics and short-term decision-making, reports for pattern analysis, and this idea that the best reporting is actually reporting that allows you to tailor views to how you work and how you think. I think, and you can check me on this, Wade, but I think sometimes there's this idea orgs will need a specific report that does this specific thing. And I think that third point is all about the most useful thing you can do is establish a foundation for your data that allows you to manipulate it into views that are relevant to you, relevant to your organization, your community. With that, I'd love to know if any stories of this not going well come to mind, or stories about unwieldy data and reporting just being a nightmare, if you will.
You want me to tell people's business. That's what you want me to do, right?
If you could include their name and why they're from.
And an address, of course. We need to drive by. I have, in fact, I asked this question of some folks I was with this morning, and I was told about membership data, in which there were 9 different sources, and they're pulling it from a million different directions, trying to now put it into one spreadsheet. To me, the horror story is that whatever the system is for collecting the data is the answers that you're looking for. It's actually creating more work for you. And that would push me over to the thing that really matters to me when I talk with people. And that is understanding the difference between the lead measure and the lag measure. And that the lead measure are the actions that you ought to be taking. This is where live data matters, because you can see are the actions that I'm taking producing a result. Where the lag measures already happened, and you can go scour every report you want to scour, you're not going to change it. It doesn't matter. So I want to give my shout out for the importance of live data to get you to take all the actions that you need to produce the results that you're trying to get to.
It's almost like you know where I'm going with this, because we talked a little bit about predictive insights in this presentation in the last section, but totally agree. I think understanding the difference is really critical, because in one case you're going in prepared for what's to come. In the other, you're any moment you're taking reactive action is going to wield less in terms of value and outcomes. With that said, I mean, I think this relates a little bit to being able to filter and slice data for actionable insights. I think, often what we need is not a report. What we need is the insight that's drawn out from the data. And data can be overwhelming. I think it's critical for all Ys. It's something they share, but everyone has varying levels of proficiency when it comes to reading into data. So the goal here is just to highlight some really, really high level best practices for turning that raw data into action that can drive organizational decisions. So filters have come up a lot. Just the ability to manipulate views, specific time periods have come up a lot. And again, period over period comparisons are really critical lenses to read your data through. An example would be filtering for program enrollment during peak and off-peak seasons to adjust staffing or marketing efforts. What I mean there is a natural trend, both upward and downward at different points in time, different points of the year. And there are factors outside of those numbers that are influencing the trend. They can be even community specific. They can be arguably demographic specific. And the key is to establish benchmarks for those periods in time. So numbers should trend downward in off-peak seasons. What's important to know is, are they trending off based on period over period comparisons? And Wade had some examples of that, where looking at a multi-year lens is going to be the way to determine that. These best practices also allow you to transform data into action, as I mentioned. So identifying segments that have higher churn rates and crafting retention strategies for them. If we use the guest pass example earlier, it might be a nod to, hey, we have to consider the initial experience that someone has when they come in here as a guest, and what can we do to optimize that experience. Filtering for forecasting. So just understanding how to use data to forecast future behavior. These insights can come from identifying leading indicators, as you referenced, such as declining participation in specific programs that allow for a more proactive adjustment. An example would be forecasting seasonal program demand or anticipating membership drops in specific demographics that allow you to take action to make movement on that future trend. And so the period over period analysis stuff is obviously critical for understanding the normal fluctuations and the seasonality. But the benchmarks that come with manipulating those time views for peak and off-peak periods is also really critical. And that's more referring to busy periods in your org, but it also can refer to, as you mentioned, changes in emerging demographics, who you're serving, what age groups they fall into, those sorts of things. And using departure from your benchmarks to forecast those future trends. So, Wade, I'm wondering aloud if you have any moments that come to mind where manipulating or slicing data in a new or interesting way led to an epiphany, if you will.
Yeah, so this actually happened about a week ago in Montreal. So we were talking about membership data and got on the topic of retention rate for membership. I've been in the Y for 4 decades. We've always talked about retention is 13 months and got deep into that whole conversation. And then somehow it became about engagement. How do we measure engagement? And engagement is not something that we measure, but engagement, this is the lead lag measure piece that we were just talking about. If we have people engage, the back end of that lag measure about whether they will stay or not increases in our favor, not out of our favor. But engagement is not something that we were tracking in any robust way. So my aha moment was, oh, we're counting the wrong thing. We're counting what happens at the end of the day, as opposed to what's happening live, right in our face, that we have an opportunity to address and to change. And my disposition now is engagement is the thing to track, not whether I stay a member or not, whether I pay for another 12 months or not, but how do I track if the person is engaged?
Yeah, I love the example because I think you could, if you're zeroing in on a specific organization, you could have arguments about that 13-month marker and whether that's like an absolute truth when it comes to churn. I think measuring what's going on leading into churn is going to tell you a lot more than any static figure that's sort of universally accepted as a metric.
And that's also true in your youth sports program, because you gave that example several slides back. If a kid is aging out of our program or a large group, say we had 1 year where we had explosive growth in the youth and government program, youth sports program, whether you're a Y or Park District, doesn't matter. And now that group is aging out. It shouldn't be a surprise that your numbers are going to drop.
Absolutely.
That's just the reality of where you're at. But if we're not paying attention, if we're only paying, if we're counting stuff 1 year at a time, not counting multi-year of the data, then we miss that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it's a good example for why both matter. Both lenses matter. You need to be tracking what's going on and then the higher level, period views. Which leads to, the last section, which is about leveraging trends and predictive insights. So an example, if summer camp enrollment increases consistently each year, that probably tells you that you can plan for staffing and marketing efforts accordingly. If the trend is going the other way, you're probably reducing staff and increasing marketing efforts, and vice versa. Another example would be if you notice a downward trend in retention for certain demographics, you can develop more targeted retention programs. And those predictive insights help you allocate resources efficiently, whether it's for staffing, program development, or marketing. Because I think the key is lagging indicators are going to be less efficient when it comes to allocating resources. And they're going to stand in your way, if that's all you're using, it's going to stand in your way of being able to run a lean organization. So predictive insights and forecasting, they tell you not only what will happen, but also why it will happen. And Wade, I think that's a nod to our conversation about, the levels of engagement and how they're trending before you arrive at a member churn. So a steady rise in digital engagement can indicate the need for expanded online offerings or new virtual programs. I mean, the soccer example means we know that there's certain programs that are going to be where the member life cycle is going to be finite. If they're engaging a lot, there's probably an opportunity for the organization to take advantage as much as you can of offering relevant programs to those individuals, because they're there and they're ready to engage with your program. It also helps prepare for upcoming challenges or opportunities, depending on which way the trend line is going. And overall, it just improves decision making and it improves org efficiency. And so the idea is use this data, especially leading indicators, for future ready strategies such as seasonal promotions, new program offerings, and re-engagement campaigns, which I think, especially for orgs that haven't been tracking engagement, re-engagement campaigns may be all the more valuable to those organizations. If certain months are historically going to show lower engagement, how do we plan ahead with retention-focused initiatives? And in a way, look to incentivize that engagement. And then just being adaptive and agile when evolving needs change. And so to just recap, life cycle data can help predict not only what's going on, but why it's happening. By understanding these trends, you can optimize resources and spending for your org. And your offering should be as ever-changing as your community segments. We talked about at the beginning about emerging demographics. That's always going to be true. It's an ever-shifting landscape, and so programming should mirror that in some way. And so the last question I have for you, Wade, is there should be some examples of seasonality or something esoteric about a certain why that was uncovered using historical data that led to a Y or a center to change their operations or programming going forward.
And then look up esoteric. Make sure I understand what you meant. I got it. All right. Hey, here's what I'd point to for Indiana, and I want to go back to third-party payers because I think it lines up with the items that you're sharing. For us, the information became key in making decisions. So when we look back at our relationship with third-party payers over the last decade, we can see how much folks have actually paid, how much we've subsidized, and then we can look at trends of how our community is aging faster and faster, more and more people. And then you have to ask yourself the question, based on this forecast, based on what the data is telling us, will we be able to sustain this long run? And the answer was no, there's no way we can. And in addition, it pointed out when the numbers got added up, there's 41 YMCAs in the state of Indiana. So when the numbers got added up, they were significant. And we realized we're subsidizing Medicare, because that's what the third-party payers come through, by millions of dollars, and yet calling ourselves a nonprofit organization. And when we shared that with boards, nearly every single board, I think there was only one board, that they all said, we got to change that. That makes no sense. We can't be the nonprofit subsidizing the government. That just doesn't make sense. And that's part of what, it's that data that we were able to draw out of the information that we've had that helped us make the right decisions to go forward.
Yeah, I love the example. I'm thinking about the alliance level. I also love how it shows how in aggregate these trends can represent massive shifts. Like they're really important and big numbers. And if you zero in, to the org level, for one Y even, over time, these things accumulate, and there's, trends can go in exponential directions. I think that's the whole idea of leading indicators.
And your point, when the data was sliced per Y, I don't think it was when we put the data in aggregate, we collected it all. This is probably where our systems would really work if they were all one.
Yeah.
We in 3 minutes, but now it took us months to aggregate it. But once we saw what the data was, then it causes us to think a little differently.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, I'm gonna open up for some questions, but before I get that, I just want to say thank you, Wade, for navigating this conversation. I think this, all of your insights were really critical to making the message valuable. So I'll open it up to the group. I don't know if there have been questions in the chat, but I'm going to pause there and let Mike hop in.
Yeah, not yet. I will give people a chance to.
Dante was first on the call, so I just figured Dante was going to have at least one question.
So they seem like a keener, I have to say. And Kelly as well. If you have any questions, kick on. CFOs love data and KPIs. But just to fill some airspace here, if I may, we're talking about KPIs and demographic data here. And as I came into this topic with you, Andrew, I was like, okay, cool. I know KPIs, we're looking at the business, demographics, we're looking outside of the business. Looking inside the business is about analyzing performance, looking outside of the business is looking for opportunities. But then you talk about lifecycle data at the end. And I think as you measure and track and accurately get a pulse of where your members are in their life cycle with your center, that's an internal metric, but it's also highlighting opportunities, right? Do you have a bunch of new people for whom engagement is going to really help make the difference? Do you have a bunch of established people who maybe you want to look at keeping the programming relevant for them, making sure that they keep coming back throughout the length of their membership? Are they coming up for renewal? In which case, some more high-touch marketing campaigns to make sure that they're aware that they're engaged at the critical time. And then you're also talking about demographic data, which is highlighting huge opportunities in the business or huge threats in the business of the changing age brackets of your participants. And so this whole thing has really broadened my understanding of what each of those two things can do. Wade's begging for questions. Do you have any questions for us, Wade?
Tell me, sure, I'll ask one. I'll give you a chance to give an Amelia commercial.
You're asking the wrong person, Andrew. You're ready.
What is it about your product that would enable organizations to leverage KPIs and demographic data to serve their constituents?
I just saw you muted yourself, Andrew. Is that you saying over to you, Mike? Because I'd love for you to take this one if you can.
I'm going to hop on this. And in a roundabout way, I sort of made this commercial somewhere in this presentation, but I think that this is really, really relevant for Ys, as we saw in your examples, Wade, but I think it's a pervasive misunderstanding that supersedes this particular industry when it comes to reporting, which is that being able to collect the right foundational data points is key to drawing out insights, both leading and lagging. And over-engineering and over-structuring data to be rigid is often leading you into alleyways that are going to inhibit your ability to act quickly. And so I think what's really wonderful about Amelia's approach to reporting is we focus on the foundation and we are purposefully malleable, moving away from maybe traditional box reporting that is expected, that is industry specific, but rather helping orgs understand these high level groupings of data and information, like membership relevant data, engagement relevant data, and the likes. And then making it possible to tailor it to specific organizations that may look very different from the one down the road. I would say that is the key strength.
Also, for our partners, your data is your data. We keep it, you can track it going forward across time. Like, we won't disappear it after 6 months if you want to go back and look, like, fast forward 3-4 years into a happy and fruitful partnership. If you want to look back at the data from day one and see, like, that's possible. We don't ship it out or get rid of it. So that really helps.
Yeah, to Mike's point, I think you gave the example of looking at data in aggregate at the alliance level. And I think that requires platform tools that allow you to move information both in and out easily in order to have all the data points in one place to look at them and see something compelling.
We have a question from Kelly. Wait, what was the process used to collect the data needed to evaluate and then eventually renegotiate contracts with third-party payers?
I thought I was talking to her privately, but turns out we're not. So let's talk about it. All right, here we go. So if you talk with Dr. Gloria Winters at YUSA, Chief Medical Officer there, she has a spreadsheet that you can send to every YMCA to aggregate their data. And then you just get back together and start having some conversations about what that data implies. Some Ys like to only collect 6 months, some collect a year. We ask for more than that because we wanted more information in that. It's not automated. It's all done by hand, but you can pull it up from reports that you get from your third-party payer. You can track back as far as you want to.
Right.
Hey, Kelly, how many Ys are there in South Carolina? Can they speak or they can't speak?
No, they can't speak. They have to type, but maybe she's gone.
So we'll see. She does not. Okay. I would just say I don't know if everyone on here is from the Y. It's a difficult conversation. Ys tend to go in 5,000 different directions, and trying to get them back to one direction. If you can do it, boy, there's great force in it because we are an unstoppable force. We had to remind third-party payers that we're 70% of their business. So if you don't want to play with us, then we'll just shut the door on the entire state on you. And that had their attention. But you got to mean it. And the group, they meant it.
And you got to have data to back yourself up, right? Like, if you have that much volume, if you're dealing with 40-something Ys,
yeah.
So
yeah, getting 20 Ys there on one page is work in itself.
Yeah.
So good luck. Hey, Kelly, one of your YMCA's, you get a new CEO. He is from Indiana and was part of this. So you get at least one person that would be for it.
Nice. Well, if there's no more questions, we can wrap things up, give people a bit of time back at the top of the hour. Is there any closing thoughts you have, Andrew?
No, I mean, I think we were able to bring this discussion in directions that I hadn't anticipated, and I'm just really happy that, Wade, you were able to be a part of it and contribute so much to these topics. So thank you for that.
Okay, I have one final question for those that are listening. That is, are we meeting their expectation, or is there a question that they came to the call with but never had it answered? I think for the time I've put into this, they at least have answered their question.
If you like, Wade, I could include a small call to action in the email where we send out the recording, asking for further questions and clarifications, and can forward those to you if you like. Some people, I feel, may think of a question after we've done.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll leave it up to you.
Happy days. Cool. Well, all that's left from me is to thank you both. Well, thank everyone for the time today, the two of you, for a great conversation, everyone for attending. It's really a privilege to be working with such mission-driven, wonderful people, and great to be able to sort of share some knowledge and start a conversation. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Wade.
All
I
right.
will see you soon.